Okay, I'm still running at 20 volts, but whilst playing around with all these voltages and realising this effect doesn't really want to operate down at low voltages, I also discovered another strange effect, which is when I dial in the amplification effect, and this is only at 20 volts, if I dial it in from the other side of the wave and bring it across like that, what you'll see, looking at the ammeter, is as we bring it in and slide it over, we get the multiplication effect most strongly right at the end, which is as you would expect because the transformer rebounds. But if you stick it there, you actually get a drop on the ammeter. A short right at the end of that period can actually have the effect of reducing the input power by about 20%. By having the wave right there, instead of there, or instead of there, you have the wave just shorting right before the end of the pulse, which I find peculiar. And a lot of this may transpire to not be particularly relevant, as this effect is important. But what's really going to do the work is being able to utilize the magnets and push them more strongly. So ultimately, that's where we're going with that, and hopefully pretty shortly. In fact, I'm about to hook up my 4-channel scope and take some more shots. But yeah, if there's any difficulty replicating this, then there is obviously some issues with the voltages, and I suspect what that is largely to do with the transformer, which is actually fairly thick. It's about 1/5 of a 1000-watt microwave transformer with the middle cut out of it. So that would ordinarily, you might suspect that to be more like 200 watts, 1/5 of 1000 watts. So it might well not be such to do with the voltage, but more to do with just not sufficient magnetic flux. But yeah, there is certainly margins for error that need to be considered if you're not seeing what you want to see. Alright, I just needed to commit that to record before I play around with some more things. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, let's dial in a little coil shorting. Looks pretty good. And here we are on the new scope. Bottom trace is the input. That's the power transistor. That's the output. That's the on period for the output coil going to the light globes. This one is for the shorting coil, blue one, and the yellow one is actually on the output coil. So if we dial in the blue trace, the shorting coil, we can play with the amplitude of that, and we can see our amplification effect. Very good. Now back to playing with the geometry of this new toy. Hi guys, this is an important one. I had a long held suspicion that my previous assertion about the timing of the shorting coil may have been wrong. Previously what I said was I was failing to get the effect when the output coil just had a diode running from the coil, the diode and then the light globes and then back to the coil. My assertion was you needed to chop the signal like that to insert that in the output coil. and that at the time enabled me to get a better result. My estimate was that it was allowing the transformer to relax. As it transpires, I wanted to run a simple test, which was basically what I've done here is put a jumper cable in and bypass the transistor junction. So by doing so, you don't get the voltage drop across the transistor, but critically, I am still getting the advantages. Thusly, and not only am I getting the advantage by putting it right on the edge of the peak, that gives me an amplitude gain. As I just demonstrated, when I put it about there, it gives me a drop on the input. A drop on the input voltage, despite the fact there's actually a short on the input, which is very strange. So I'll demonstrate that. This is no shorting at all. That slight gain there that I'm going on off on, only very slight. That is right on the edge, and then if I move it further over, I actually get, this is now wholly inside. It's not on the edge, that's right the way inside. That's actually shorting on the main positive offset. The input power drops noticeably, and I get more power at the same time. So that is very interesting. So although I'm actually going to leave this part of the circuit in there to chop the output power, I suspect it may not actually be necessary. So we could probably eliminate one of these boards. But yeah, now I'm going to go on to the more important questions I wanted answered. However, yeah, I'm glad this worked out even better than I thought. So yeah, I'm glad I took the time to do this before we moved on. Thanks for watching. Here we have a change in the shorting coil. It was previously 300 turns counterclockwise. I brought this one down to 100 turns counterclockwise. And as you can see, when we dial the short circuit in and out, the effect that's had has to remove the effect. It now no longer amplifies. Yeah, losing all those extra turns has prevented it from working. Apparently it's pulling it down too hard. So, alright, that test recorded. Let's get on with the next one. Okay, I just reversed the last experiment.
Review.
The last experiment involved changing the single coil. So this has got 300 turns. I swapped it with a 100 turn coil. That's the shorting coil, and as a result of that, the shorting effect no longer amplified. But I've just swapped it back for the 300 turns, and the effect works again. So I can pretty much verify that. And I found basically you get the highest amount of light if you tune it for the lowest input current. So tuning it either way will work. You can tune it for that the lowest drop in amplitude, the lowest current level, or the highest amount of light. They seem to coincide. So yeah, very cool. Go back onto the next experiment. I'm going to put a greater turn output coil on there, because these globes are really not pulling down the amplitude of the wave. So I suspect I could get more power out of it with more turns on the wire for the same input. So let's try that. 10 volt globes, a peak of about 23 volts. That's the brightness. Now let's swap the coil over to a higher winding output coil. Okay, this is the brightness using the same 20 volts. The element is lit, but hardly at all. So same voltage input, thusly the same current. The voltage peak has gone up ever so slightly, but the internal resistance of the coil has rendered it pointless. So I'll keep playing. Okay, just a brief correction. The output coil, I said it was 100 turns, it was actually 180. So what I've done now is reduce it to 100, and the effect is amplitude is about the same, and the effect we're looking for still exists. The best light output coincides with the lowest current. So, pretty good. Let's see what's next. Alright, now this one's pretty cool. The input voltage is at 25 volts, half an amp. And what I've done is I'm still shorting one of the secondaries, but at the same time I have both of the secondaries in series running through the globes and the relaxation energy. So we're getting quite a good amount of amplification via the shorting. And as before, a tiny amount of current drop as the brightness increases. Very cool. So this looks extremely promising. I wasn't sure how promising because the using the 300 turn output coil has never worked very well. I suspect it's just too much resistance. So what I would have expected to work better is I've got a set of 100 turn coils, a pair of 100 turn coils, or rather one pair counterclockwise, and I've got a pair counterclockwise. Then I have the same for 180 and 300, so a total of 12 coils. And then there's a few other miscellaneous ones. So yeah, I might try some 180s in there as well, see if we can get a slightly better result. I wouldn't have actually expected over Unity just yet until I've made a few of the other adjustments, but I must say this is about as close to Unity as I have ever seen, I'm fairly sure. So yeah, let's get back to it and keep working. Thank you. Okay. Those globes there, they're our output globes. And this is one for comparison. 0.3 amps, 10 volts. And these two here look about the same by eye. Also 0.3 amps, but 25 volts. So I'm losing about 30% efficiency. And then if you calculate the resistance of the light globes and the resistance of the coils, 30% loss would be about right. So the transformer itself is doing pretty well. Now that's the good side of it. The bad side of it is that that tiny little blue speck there, that's the shorting coil signal. I got it down as small as I can on the duty cycle so I could try and determine what the truth is. What's going on here? I can create these lovely big extra spikes with the tiny short that that dump it more heavily into the negative in theory. But in practice, what I've physically done with the transformer is made the transformer so good that as it transpires, this other effect has vanished. The only way I can get it back is by adding more losses to the transformer. The whole thing seems extremely tight. Now, people tell me this has got a lot to do with coupling, and that you want a loose coupling. Well, to me that means losses. So essentially what I'm being told is introduce losses to up your efficiency, or to create an effect. Now, that sounds stupid, but what my mentor may have meant by that is give yourself an advantageous position to discover how the principles work before we go and add the elements to the transformer that will actually allow it to create significant overunity, which is multiple windings of primaries, the geometry of the primaries, and the extra magnets. So it's all starting to make a bit more sense now, and it doesn't really bother me that I've managed to create problems and then fix problems on a seemingly ongoing basis, because ultimately that really was the objective of the exercise. I got myself doing that. I got myself taking longer just so I'll learn more, and apparently my mentor had me doing that as well. So I'm lucky I named this video series Transformers X of 365, because that will probably turn out to be somewhat true. But at least I'm going to have a really good understanding by the time we get there. And I'm going to be able to simplify this circuit so much that essentially, at the end of the day, hopefully it's going to look like nothing more than a dimmer switch, a basic diac and triac arrangement with a knob on it. And that would really be excellent. That would be evolution. So, rah!